Good morning. Welcome to the garden. I'm glad you're here with us today. This is one of those days, Mother's Day, that I approach with a great deal of caution. That's because I know there's a whole range of experiences and emotions in this room and far beyond this room. That was really highlighted for me when I read a post that it was actually a post that a woman put online, but it was from a letter that she had addressed to her pastor, asking that pastor to be aware of what was going on in all the people's lives who were a part of the congregation on Mother's Day Sunday. And she began with herself because she was someone who was struggling with infertility. She wanted to be a mother, but that had not come to pass yet. But she also mentioned other situations that she thought the congregation should be sensitive to. One of those was for those who had given birth to children whose children were no longer living with them, or for parents who were grieving the loss of a son or a daughter. She talked about those for whom children hadn't been a part of their life path. And she talked about those whose children had strayed far away from the values that the family had held and seemed lost to them. That's true of folks in this room. All of those situations probably apply to somebody in this room and to others. Everywhere we go, we experience those same kinds of situations. And then if you think about the situations we've had with our own mothers, we've all had mothers. We've come into this world, we've been nurtured and we've grown and been raised in this world. And so we've had someone in our lives who has done that, maybe differently than we wish, or maybe it was okay, or maybe it was spectacular. As we think about those, some of those mothers are deceased, some of them are still alive, and we probably have all kinds of experiences of them. Maybe we have relationships that were close and intimate and fun-loving and life-giving. And the opposite could be true as well. Maybe they're tension-filled relationships, or maybe there's estrangement in a relationship. As with any kind of relationship at all, there are all different kinds of ones. And we just need to be aware and sensitive to that fact. And so that's why this day is sort of a difficult one for me to think about in all the situations that we experience. But, I thought, well, what was the origin of Mother's Day? I don't know if you were aware of it or not. If I knew it, I had forgotten what it was. But I did a little research and discovered that Mother's Day actually began back in the 1850s. And it began in Grafton, Virginia. It began with a woman whose name was Anna Reeves Jarvis. And she had formed a group of Women's Day work clubs. Women's Workday clubs, I guess they were called. And the purpose of these clubs was to help provide medication for the poor, to take care of those who were sick, and to provide shelter for children with TB. Then the Civil War broke out. And she went around to these clubs and asked them to make a pledge that they wouldn't let the war disrupt and move them away from their mission of helping people, and that they would still remain friends and be ones who guided the good in their community. And they did exactly that, because they were able to care for soldiers on both sides of the conflict, and in fact nursed many of those soldiers back to health. After the war ended, Anna Reeves Jarvis worked to bring reconciliation across the Mason-Dixon line, and she became an avid and vital worker for peacemaking in the world. In 1850, her daughter was born, and her daughter was named Anna as well. Anna watched her mother and witnessed the actions that she had taken until her mother's death in 1905. So in 1907, she organized the first official Mother's Day, and that was to bring forth the real reason for Mother's Day, to bring about peace and to work for obliterating poverty that her mother had worked so hard to do, because she didn't want that to be forgotten. Well, it was in 1914, 100 years ago now, that Mother's Day became an official holiday. And of course, we've seen what Hallmark has done to that over the years. And I can't help but think that if Anna Reeves Jarvis were alive today, she would probably object to all the commercialization that's happened over the years. But nonetheless, that's where we find ourselves today, is Mother's Day 2014. It's a time when we honor those who have nurtured us or continue to nurture us, and as we move into adulthood. And the Bible passage for this morning is really talking about that kind of thing. This is one of the Proverbs. We'll talk about it in just a minute, but let's look at it first. Pay close attention, friend, to what your father tells you. Never forget what you learned at your mother's knee. Wear their counsel like flowers in your hair, like rings on your fingers. Now remember, we've talked about this before, that Proverbs is a collection of wisdom teachings. There was a group of teachers who really tried to instruct the young. And one of the things they're trying to help the youth understand is that parents are foundational. They are the ones who provide the first and most important models and examples and teachings that we need in order to grow into adulthood and to be a responsible, good adult. You know, that's the most important thing for us to remember, but as a parent, sometimes it's a little hard to keep that always in mind and to be aware of what that is. Sometimes, well, I guess I can just speak for myself to say that sometimes I sort of majored in the minors rather than really thinking about the most important thing. Let me give you an example of what I mean. When our daughter was probably 11, 12, 13 years old, she wanted to get her ears pierced, because other girls she knew were getting their ears pierced at the time. And I was very resistant to that, thinking she was way too young for that to happen. And anyway, I told her that I got my ears pierced when I was 26. She would get her ears pierced when she was 26. She didn't quite understand that rationale. And we were in a real conflict over this thing. It was very frustrating. And I remember sharing with a friend of mine a little bit while this was still going on and sharing all the frustration I was experiencing. And she said, you know, I'll give you some free advice. You can take it or leave it. But it turned out to be very wise counsel. She said, Linda, pick your battles. You may not want to go to the mat on this one. Well, she was right, you know, and you can probably guess what happened as a result of that. But the reality is sometimes we really focus on the wrong thing, and I was doing that. I was picking something that was really, in the whole scheme of things, a pretty minor thing, and instead focusing on that, and I was sacrificing the quality of the relationship, the possibility for a good, strong, loving relationship. And so I had to constantly remind myself that it's important to think of what's really, really vital and what really makes for a good future for people. Because I think our goal as parents is to help our children grow up to be happy, healthy, independent, and self-sustaining adults who live in this world. Dorothy Canfield Fisher said that. She said, a mother is not a person to lean on, but a person to make leaning unnecessary. And that is, our role is to help people grow into independence, to become the people they're intended to be. And to do that, we have to keep our eye on the most important things and not focus on the things that really don't matter in the long run. But you know what happens sometimes in the midst of living life and all the stuff we experience, we miss some of those really most important things, some of the precious moments that come together to really create a meaningful life. We found a kid president, you know, you've seen him before, where he has all kinds of wisdom to offer, and he's talking about moms. Let's take a look. I don't know about you, but several things that child said had a lot of relevance in a lot of situations, I think. The first one, the point he made about the phone. Isn't that the major distraction we deal with, most of us, all the time? How many times do we see people totally glued to their phone, walking down the street or sitting at a table with other people, and yet they're totally focused on that phone? And you can't relate to one another. You can't connect with one another when we're so distracted with all those kinds of things. And, you know, I'm as guilty as probably, maybe some of you aren't as guilty as I am, but I'm guilty of that as well. And we really sacrifice the relationship and the value of the relationship because we need to pay attention. And especially with our kids, we need to pay attention to them. That's how they learn that they are respected and valued and cared for and loved, because we focus on them, we pay attention to them. And we can't do that if we're distracted with our phones. So it says, hey, let's put our phones away. Let's leave them away when we're with those that we love. Another thing that really struck home with me was when he said to stop cleaning. Now, I'm not awful about this whole thing. I just don't like clutter and messiness. It really drives me crazy. And so when our daughter was growing up, she was getting toys out, and I was putting what she just had out away, and was never really focused on her. I was always trying to intend to get all the toys put away and the things straightened up and neat. And finally, I came to realize that she wasn't wired that way. That was simply not important to her. So we came to this compromise in our household that we would close the door to her room except on cleaning day, and then she had to live by my standards, and that seemed to work fairly well. However, I have to tell you that as I think back on that, the fact that I was always, cleaning up from dinner or cleaning up the toys and straightening things up in one way or another meant that I missed a lot of interaction with her. That would have been better spent. Maybe it was sitting and reading a book together, or just sitting and talking, or just sitting side by side, being with her, and I sacrificed those. And I'm sorry about that now. I wish I had it to do over, because I try to do it differently these days. As I think about this, I wonder if we might need to engage in a little experiment, to sit down for a day or even a half day and to make a list of all the things we do or we have done during that time period. And then to go through and sort of evaluate that list, assess that list. What was really important, the most important things that we did there? I mean, there are things for ours or others' well-being, but my guess there are probably some pretty mundane and mindless things that are on that list too. And we might realize that on that list were some of those really, really precious moments that we may have missed had we not written them down. And those are the really important things. The things that we learn, sometimes the hard way, is the small moments, those precious, special little moments, are the ones that stay with us. They're the ones that really shape our lives. So maybe something else we could do is think about what that is that warms our heart. What are the things that really do help us see life and see what really matters in a whole different way? Maybe it's having a candlelit dinner with our kids, with our family. Maybe it's a matter of just playing with our kids and listening to them laugh or watch them smile or watching their eyes pop open when they make a brand new discovery. It could be something as simple as watching a sunrise or a sunset together. One of my very favorite things is, and our daughter doesn't share this because she doesn't like to get up this early, is getting up early on a spring morning and hearing the birds sing. That's one of my favorite things to see happen. But there are other things too, like say fresh tomatoes out of the garden, taking that first bite of that. Or maybe it's just making a phone call to someone we love. Or maybe it's saying, I love you, or a good night kiss. Those are all little things, but those are the moments that last. Those are the ones that really make our lives. And so I hope that we will pay attention to those moments and be grateful for them.